On the 9th of July 2019, Edu Gaspar was appointed as the first ever technical director of Arsenal Football Club. At the time of recording, since July 2019, Arsenal have had 27 first-team players permanently leave the club. Not counting the small fees received when players leave on loan during their final contracted year, the club have recouped a little over £109 million in transfer fees in that time. That's just over £4 million on average per player. This summer, we've done an Accountants FC deal for Bernd Leno, received less than £6 million for Lucas Torreira, and look set to cancel another contract with Hector Bellerin. And we've got a few more in the departure lounge too, who don't look set to make great deals of money, relatively speaking. Hearing all that, one could certainly draw the conclusion that Edu Gaspar is not skilled at extracting value from his squad. And on the face of it, you'd be hard-pressed to argue. Before you start to delve a little bit deeper. Before we carry on, I say this every video, but I don't accept ad campaigns unless I genuinely like and use the product that I'm talking about, and I do like this and I do use it. It's called the OneFootball app. I had the joy of watching United's misfortune unfurl on Sunday afternoon on the OneFootball app, and it's where you can get news, fixtures, live scores, updates, stats, and updates on the transfer market from everywhere around the world. The best feature for me is the aggregator of transfer news. It saves you a lot of traipsing around the internet looking for rumours. It just all goes into one feed here. And as Gary Neville would say, ultimately at this moment in time, that's useful. Go download the OneFootball app for free now. The link is in the description. For some reason, this image always makes me laugh. A suited and booted Petr Cech is depicted negotiating his contract in a still from EA Sports FIFA 19 career mode while still wearing his iconic protective headgear. It's funny because it's probably a mistake, but I also think it has some kind of bizarre potency, which is why it went viral. The likes of FIFA and Football Manager have done an immeasurable amount of good for football, especially in terms of popularising the game overseas. But I also think their ubiquity and success, partly by gamifying complex processes into fun, interactive cutscenes like this, has percolated subconsciously into how many fans analyse the business of football. I'm not saying there's anyone out there who thinks this is actually how it works, but the speed of the news cycle and the booming business of reporting on transfers, spawning cult-like followings for specific personalities, can often remove the human, unpredictable element of all this, and gamify transfer business itself into one giant competition between clubs, detaching it from reality. In that image, Cech is a function, the headgear never removed so as to humanise him slightly, and remind you he's not just an asset to be traded. In the game, if you press the right buttons, he'll do what you want. But fans are impatient, and so am I. Understandably so, when, in our case, it appears that further strengthening can't happen without outgoings. We know it's not like the games, and we know we shouldn't believe everything we read online, but how hard can it be to sell a Premier League footballer? And when we do, why do they go for so cheap? What is Edu doing? During Arsene Wenger's final pre-season at Arsenal in July 2017, he said this.
In the future, to me, you will see that more and more. Players going to the end of a contract. Why? Because the transfers become so high, even for normal players, that you will see more and more players going to the end of a contract because nobody will want to pay the amount of money that is demanded. And I'm convinced that in the next 10 years, that will become usual.
Arsene's intelligence saw him ahead of the curve more than a few times in his career, and this was no different. Neymar's move to PSG, confirmed just 4 days after that footage was shot, was a watershed moment. For players wanting to move on from their clubs, aware there's a limit on their earning power in a relatively short career, and a limit on clubs willing to match such an expenditure in the post-Neymar market, a new approach needed to be found. Now, by players running down their deals more frequently and forcing the issue, transfer fees can come down and moves are more likely to happen. The millions saved in paying the selling club's expected fee can now go into signing on fees, wages, and agents' pockets. Arsenal don't exist in a vacuum. We had the Eddie Nketiah situation last year, waiting out his contract till the end of the season. Who knows if he always wanted to be at Arsenal, but we do know there is no way he was getting the wages he's on now from a club who also had to pay a transfer fee 1 or 2 years ago. Without an upfront fee, the overall financial package makes more sense to a club. Us, in this case, and Eddie gets a bigger slice of the pie. In fact, in this case, he gets the entire pie. So the power balance has shifted further and further towards players, making someone like Edu's job much harder. But the balance of power in the top 5 European leagues has also changed. The frustrated fans just want us to shift some players, and resentment grows for the club and sometimes even the players. We just want them to go somewhere else. But where does Edu sell to? The numbers I'm about to cite are all from data analysts and salary experts, Capology. I'm always slightly dubious of the accuracy of all these things, as unless you've read the contract, you don't know what the player's on, and bonuses and add-ons always complicate things. I think some of these might be wrong, but the team of analysts appear to do their due diligence, issue corrections, and take as much data from as wide a pool as they can, and I don't think you'll ever get total accuracy. All of these numbers are converted to British sterling. They say that in the Bundesliga, the highest paid player that doesn't play for either Bayern Munich or Borussia Dortmund is Andre Silva at RB Leipzig on around £121,000 per week. To put that into context, Hector Bellerin was or is on around £110,000 per week at Arsenal. The 25th best paid player in the Premier League is Heung-min Son, earning just under £200,000 per week. The 25th best paid player in the Bundesliga is on £88,000 per week. Wolfsburg's Maximilian Arnold. Pablo Mari was or is on £85,000 per week. The top 10 individual earners in each league play for either Barcelona or the two Madrid clubs in Spain, Dortmund or Munich in Germany, Juventus or Inter in Italy, and you know who in Ligue 1. In the Premier League, the top 10 is dominated by City, Liverpool and United, but the top 25 also includes Chelsea 4 times, Spurs 3 times, Arsenal 2 times and Nottingham Forest once. So there's a much wider pool of clubs in the Premier League able to offer competitive and substantial wages. Lingard is another great example of an Nketiah type situation that we saw earlier, and in fact his club, Nottingham Forest, have outspent every Serie A club this window and don't seem to be slowing down. Italy's top paid player, Dusan Vlahovic, is on less than Anthony Martial. All of that is to say that the Premier League is miles ahead financially, actually more than I thought when I went into this. So when we look at our departure lounge, we have to remember that the pool of clubs that they can go to is really limited, as those players are very unlikely to be going to the top 10 or 12 most elite clubs outside of the Premier League. It's all very well saying we need to sell players, but if there's no buyers, you're going to struggle. Let's take Nicolas Pepe as an example. Probably the most valuable player in our departure lounge, but hopefully it's not unfair to say he's not getting in PSG, for example's front line over Mbappe, Neymar and Messi. I think that's fair, but someone in the comments will definitely tell me it isn't. Then, which clubs are interested in Pepe? We've seen links to Lyon, Marseille and Sevilla. Let's say we want £20 million for Pepe in an ideal world. Lyon's record ever acquisition is former Arsenal man Jeff Rein Adelaide for £21 million. Marseille's is Dimitri Payet for £26.37 million, and Sevilla's record transfer fee was for Jules Koundé at £31.5 million. And all of those are correct at time of recording. Knowing that Pepe is unwanted at Arsenal looking at his minutes, and knowing that Arsenal seem to be willing to do some kind of loan with option type deal, I can't see any of those clubs coming in with a permanent bid, likely smashing their transfer record or getting very close to it, and paying over the odds for someone who could probably best be described as out of form. Also, and he'd probably be looking for an increase, if Pepe just stayed on the same wages as he is now, he'd comfortably be Sevilla's second highest earner. At Marseille he'd be top, and at Lyon he'd be top by nearly double, ahead of So when you look at the total financial package that each club would have to put together relative to their squad, and consider that the player is likely to want an increase in wages, waiting out the contract seems more and more smart from the player's perspective, as Arsene predicted. And that's why giving out stupid contracts in the last few years has hamstrung Arsenal more than it would have, say, 10 or 15 years ago. As Edu said, if you're in London on a good contract and comfortable, then why move? Cancelling contracts is met with an eye roll, from myself included. But if there's no interest in the player, you're paying extortionate wages, and they're close to the end of the contract and not going to renew, it starts to look pretty enticing. Listen to the names of the clubs that an Arsenal player has either gone permanently or on loan to since the beginning of the 2020-2021 season, which was Arteta's first full season. Marseille, Galatasaray, Fulham, Stuttgart, Lyon, Birmingham, Newcastle, Fiorentina, Roma, Villa, AS Trentin, Barcelona, Corinthians, Real Betis, OH Leuven, Feyenoord, Udinese, Hertha, Schalke, Hibernian, Olympiacos, Fenerbahce, Nice, West Brom, Atletico and Shrewsbury. Other than Barcelona and Atletico Madrid, I would say every single club there is a step down from Arsenal. And even with those two, one was a special case with Aubameyang in relation to his disciplinary issues, and the other one was Torreira's loan, where he didn't play. That tells you something about the makeup of the squad and the value and quality of the assets Edu and Arteta started their work with. How can you sell assets for high fees if they're not high quality? But they've gone some way to addressing that. In the time Arteta and Edu have been at the club, the average wage per player per week has decreased from £81,415 in 1920 to £68,573 per week in 2022-2023 before sales, and the squad value has increased from £546.89 million in 1920 to £609.93 million in 2022-23 post-sales, pre more potential additions. Wages down, value up. Good business. And of Arsenal's 15 most valuable assets, 13 of them are 25 and under. All are on long contracts or likely to renew, indicating their value will increase. For comparison with a team with a similar financial model to us, Liverpool's average wage per week per player in 1920 was £92,043 per week, and in 2022-23, before sales, is £97,053. In 1920, their squad was worth £902.39 million and is now worth £783 million, post-sales, pre-more potential additions now. In the calendar year 2021, Arsenal earned only one less point than Liverpool in the same amount of games. It was blindingly obvious what Edu needed to do in the summer of 2019 when he came in, and I'm certainly not blind to Edu's mistakes. I would agree with the statement that Edu has not extracted maximum value he possibly could, even considering the context from Arsenal's assets, and as Roy Keane says,
that's his job.
At least partly. If you sign a player and that player doesn't perform, it's partly on the player, and it's partly on you. As much as the signs look good from his final season at Chelsea, Willian was a mistake, and an expensive one at that. We can also look at the contracts given out under this regime, which looks stupid in retrospect, which is fair, but there is some context there too. In the 1920 season, in negotiations with the likes of Pablo Mari, Cedric, Thomas Partey and Nicola Pepe, the elephant in the room was Ozil on £350,000 a week, Aubameyang on £250,000 a week, shared Kolasinac on £100,000 per week, and Mustafi on £90,000 per week. All driving up expectations, and that is mental. All driving up expectations in the wage structure. That's why these things take time, and though cancelling contracts isn't ideal, it does free you up quite significantly. It's also complicated further by the fact that Arteta requires a very specific style of player to be able to play for him. This is a photo of the squad at the beginning of the 1920 Premier League season. I think I'm right in saying that only 5 of them, Tierney, Saka, Xhaka, Smith Rowe and Martinelli, are likely to play any significant role in the upcoming season, and only 8 out of 26 are even here at all if Bellerin goes, and Reece Nelson stays. That tells us this is not the team that Arteta wanted. And when another club knows you don't want your assets, why would they pay over the odds for something you don't want? Liverpool sell well because they have a balanced squad, a proper wage structure, and they manage their assets well contract-wise. Fighting for the top titles, they're in a position of power, as are Man City. They don't need to sell. They want their assets, and clubs know that. Nico Williams can be sold for £18 million because he was on low wages, £25,000 a week, he's a good player and he had 4 years to run on his contract. They also weren't desperate as they had a ready-made replacement in Calvin Ramsey, buying before they sold, like they did with Diaz before Mane's departure. That's long-term planning and joined-up thinking, something Arsenal are starting to do. As I said earlier, the market conditions don't just affect Arsenal. We're not in a vacuum, meaning although he can improve, the accusations on Edu himself as an individual can be softened, in my opinion. I also struggle to think of clubs who are good at selling around us other than Liverpool and City. Chelsea's asset management has been poor, Spurs don't sell particularly well historically, though Bergwijn was good business, and Man United. It's frustrating all of this, because it takes time. No one wants to hear that 3 years down the line we're still paying the price for mistakes of old regimes. It's boring. But with Arsenal's recent fortunes, squad turnover and unrest, we haven't been in a position of strength or an international context to do much better than £4 million on average per player for a very, very long time. The money is real, with real life consequences, and the market itself dictates all, much as we don't want it to. Perhaps at times we paid for Edu's inexperience, but the signs to me point to someone quickly learning on the job, and there have been some significant sales. Much as I want to at times, in real life you can't quick sell people. These are humans with families, dependents and responsibilities, and funny headgear. The bigger picture, improving squad value, getting good contracts and moving towards a position of strength in negotiations should always be the aim. Oh, Lacazette. Thank you so much for watching The Different Knock. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please consider supporting us on Patreon monthly or head to buymeacoffee.com for one-time support. You can find me at OneFootball on Twitter and we're at thedifferentknock on all social media. Also, check out our podcast. All the links are in the video description. Thanks.